I pretty much have all of my midtones in at this point, but before I add anything else, any more detail, I'm just gonna go and make sure that I've double checked my reference and I've used my value scale just to see if there's anything else I need to add to this as far as midtones go. So once you start to add your dark tones and your highlights, it's really hard to go back and fix your midtones because there's all these details over top. So we're gonna talk about two different things. We're gonna talk about your dark tones first, and then we're gonna talk about adding in those highlights and details. So you guys don't have a ton of dark tones in this besides the background. I see a couple dark tones here, some here, up here, and then on this spot. So really your dark tones are anywhere on the photo that there's a shadow. So those would be your 1s, 2s, and 3s. To get dark tones, you can just take an eraser and lightly start to erase that area. And like I said earlier, that this color pencil doesn't erase perfectly, but it's still going to give you a little bit of a dark tone or a shadow. So I'm just going to go through and add my dark tones before I do anything else. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna do for this project is my favorite part, and that's adding in the highlights. So the highlights are really gonna help make your still life look like it's actually transparent and make it look like it's glass. Now, I don't want these highlights to intimidate you. I just like to think of them as little blobs, okay? Because that's really, if you look at them, that's what they look like. So you'll mostly be working in the 7, 8, and 9 range, which means you can press a little bit harder, but I always like to start with a soft highlight and then build it up, because if you press really dark at first and then you realize it's not even in the right spot, that's where you kind of run into some problems. So I'm just going to look at my reference photo and start to establish where those highlights are going to go. So like I said, I start light, and then once I've kind of got a feel for where it's at and how it looks, I can press a little harder. So these highlights will be the brightest things on your project. And they might look kind of weird up close, but guys, they look super cool when you take a step back. So even if you have, if you clip this up to the board, or if you just walk away from your seat and look at it from a distance, it's gonna help you get some perspective just so you can see what you're doing. And I don't want you to get too caught up in the details. So I know that especially this wine glass has a bunch of little details. To me, I'm just going to be drawing little white blobs that look similar to the details. And sometimes your highlights are gonna be really sharp and crisp. Like these ones right here are pretty sharp. So I'm gonna do a hard line for those highlights, but other highlights may have a soft line because they might be a little bit blurry. So in the center, especially on this mason jar, it's really bright white. But then as I get to the edges, it starts to fade out a little bit. So I'll press harder in the middle for the main part of the highlight. And then as I get to the edges, I'm just gonna take my pencil and start to lessen my pressure so I get a really fuzzy edge. But I'm gonna take the rest of this time just to finish my highlights, and that's really the last step of the project.